The nameplate came down. Not during a game. Not in front of cameras. Not with any of the ceremony that the sport sometimes offers to departures that carry weight. Quietly, without announcement, in the hours between when the last reporter left the clubhouse and when the grounds crew arrived for morning work, Hye-Sung Kim's nameplate was removed from his locker. The locker was cleaned out. The contract was terminated. And the Dodgers, a team that had entered this season carrying the weight of expectation that only comes with a roster built the way theirs was built, were suddenly facing a morning that looked nothing like the morning they had planned for. 3 players gone. 1 contract at $120 million signed. 1 emergency call made to the minor leagues before most of the city had finished their coffee. This was not a quiet Tuesday in May. This was the kind of morning that reshapes a roster and asks serious questions about what the second half of the season is going to look like. Start with the number, because the number matters. $120 million. In a sport that has seen contracts redefine what the word large means, $120 million still carries gravity. It is not a depth signing. It is not a placeholder contract for a player you hope becomes something. It is a statement. It is an organization saying, clearly, publicly, with full financial commitment, that this player is part of what we are building and we are prepared to pay for that certainty over the length of time this contract covers. The second baseman who signed that contract walked into this off-season as a question and is walking into the second half of this year as an answer. His position is no longer temporary. His place in the lineup is no longer provisional. The organization has made its decision in the clearest language available to a professional sports franchise. They wrote it in 9 figures. But the signature on that contract also made something else clear. The roster spot it occupies is not free. And in the complicated arithmetic of a major league roster, where every addition is also a subtraction, where every door that opens is doing so because another one has closed, the $120 million commitment had consequences that showed up in the same week it was announced. Hye-Sung Kim did not see Tuesday coming. Or perhaps he did. Perhaps there are things that happen in the weeks before a roster move that make the direction clear to the player even when nothing official has been said. The reduced at-bats. The conversations that don't happen. The way a coaching staff looks at you differently when the decision has already been made internally but hasn't yet been communicated formally. Whatever Kim knew or didn't know before Tuesday, the result was the same. The locker was empty. The nameplate was gone. The contract was terminated. For Kim, who had arrived in Los Angeles carrying the expectations that come with being a highly regarded import from the KBO, this ending arrived before the story had reached the chapter anyone had hoped for. The flashes of ability were real. The tools were visible. But the opportunity, which in baseball is everything, had run out before the tools had time to fully translate. That is the brutal arithmetic of playing on a team with this much talent. The margin for development is narrow. The patience for process is limited. When a roster move needs to be made and someone has to be the answer to the question of who creates the space, the player with the least established footing in the lineup is the one who pays the cost. That player was Kim. His locker is empty now. And the Dodgers continue. Max Muncy's situation is different. Heavier, in a way that the Kim situation is not. Because Kim's departure, however abrupt, carries the clean logic of roster construction. A contract signed, a space needed, a decision made. It is the business of baseball made visible. It is not comfortable, but it is legible. What is happening with Muncy does not feel legible yet. It feels like something still being written. And the chapter being written right now is not the one Muncy or the Dodgers or anyone who has watched him play in Los Angeles over the years wanted to be reading in the middle of a season with this much at stake. Bad news is the phrase being used. Not career-threatening. Not catastrophic. But bad. And in baseball, bad news that interrupts a player's season in May or June carries consequences that stretch into September, into October, into the games that determine what the year means when it is finally over. Muncy has been one of the pillars of this lineup for long enough that his absence creates a hole that is not easily papered over. His eye at the plate. His ability to draw walks, to work counts, to make the opposing pitcher throw more pitches than he wants to throw. These are skills that do not have a direct replacement sitting in the upper levels of the minor league system waiting for the call. Which is, at least in part, why the call that was made went somewhere else. Kyle Freeland did not expect to be in Los Angeles this week. Or maybe in baseball, at a certain stage of a career, you learn to expect the unexpected call. You learn to keep your bag packed and your arm ready and your mind clear of the kind of settled comfort that makes emergency duty feel like a disruption. Because emergency duty in this sport arrives without much warning and leaves even faster, and the players who handle it best are the ones who had already prepared themselves for the possibility even when the probability seemed low. Freeland's call was not a luxury call. It was not the Dodgers adding depth from a position of comfort. It was the Dodgers responding to necessity with the option available to them, which is what every organization does when the calendar and the injury report and the roster constraints all collide at the same time. What Freeland does with the opportunity is the question that will define this chapter of his story. He is not arriving in a situation that offers him time to settle in. He is not arriving to a pitching staff that has space for a learning curve. He is arriving to a team with a specific expectation of what each arm in the bullpen and the rotation needs to produce, and he is arriving at a moment when the margin for error has just gotten smaller with the loss of Muncy from the lineup. Emergency duty is exactly what it sounds like. It is not comfortable. It is not ideal. It is necessary. And sometimes, necessity is where careers make their most important turns. 3 players gone. That number deserves to sit for a moment before the analysis begins. Because in the daily rhythm of a baseball season, roster moves happen constantly. Players are designated for assignment, optioned to the minors, placed on the injured list, traded. The machinery of roster construction runs without pause from spring training to the last out of the World Series. But 3 in the same window, 3 departures in the same news cycle, against the backdrop of a $120 million commitment to one player and an emergency call to another, this is not routine maintenance. This is a reset of something. A recalibration. The organization looking at what it has, measuring it against what it needs, and making the uncomfortable decisions that the standings and the schedule demand. The Dodgers are not a team that makes these decisions carelessly. Their front office has built a reputation over years of operating with a specific logic. Every move connects to something. Every subtraction has a purpose. The decisions that look abrupt from the outside often reveal their reasoning over the weeks that follow, when the player who was signed starts to show why the number was worth it, or the player who was let go surfaces somewhere else and the comparison tells the story of why the Dodgers moved on. Whether that pattern holds in this case depends on variables that Tuesday cannot answer. It depends on the second baseman at $120 million performing the way 9-figure commitments demand. It depends on Freeland arriving and delivering innings of the quality this staff needs. It depends on Muncy's situation resolving in the direction that allows him to return to the lineup and reassume the role that has been his for long enough that the lineup is genuinely different without him. It depends on a lot of things that haven't happened yet. In the clubhouse, the silence around Kim's empty locker spoke in the way empty lockers always speak in baseball. Not with grief, exactly. The sport is too accustomed to this for grief. Players come and go. Nameplates are attached and removed. The locker gets cleaned and reassigned, and within a week it carries someone else's name and someone else's equipment, and the memory of who was there before fades into the background of a long season. But for a moment, just a moment, the empty space carries weight. It carries the weight of a player who came here with something to prove and is leaving before the proof was complete. It carries the weight of the $120 million sitting next door in the announcement that created the pressure that contributed to the decision. It carries the weight of Muncy's absence and Freeland's phone ringing and the specific kind of Tuesday that a baseball clubhouse produces when the calendar and the front office and the injury report all land on the same day. 3 players gone. 1 locker empty. 1 contract signed. One emergency called in. The Dodgers continue. They always continue. That is what teams at this level do when the roster shifts underneath them. They absorb the change and they play the game and they find out what they are made of in the weeks that follow. But Tuesday happened. And the nameplate that came down from that locker in the quiet hours before morning did not come down quietly for the player whose name was on it. Some exits in this sport have the decency to be loud. Hye-Sung Kim's was not one of them. The locker was just empty. And the season moved on without stopping to explain itself.